Welcome to the deep dive. Today, think of us as your guides, maybe. We're exploring a really interesting part of IT auditing and assurance.
hmm
Specifically, how IT auditors use the knowledge of other specialists. It's pretty crucial these days.
It really is. IT landscapes are just so complex now. No single auditor or even a whole team can possibly be an expert in absolutely everything.
Great.
So that's where Performance Standard 1206 comes in, using the work of other experts.
hmm
And there's also the Performance Guideline 2206 that goes with it. They basically give you a roadmap.
A roadmap for tapping into specific expertise when you need it without auditors needing to be, I don't know, IT superheroes who know everything.
Exactly. It makes auditing smarter, more efficient.
Okay, so let's paint a picture. I'm an IT auditor, and I'm looking at maybe a super complex cloud setup or like a new AI system. My team gets IT controls generally,
Sure.
but deep technical stuff, maybe not so much. Is that where Standard 12.6.1 and Guideline 22.6.2 kick in, considering using other experts?
Precisely. That's the starting point. You consider it when there's a clear gap in your team's technical knowledge. Like your AI example. If nobody truly understands the algorithms deeply, getting an AI specialist just makes sense.
Okay, lack of knowledge, that's one reason. What else?
Well, resources are often a big one. Maybe the audit team is stretched thin or you're facing a tight deadline.
Efficiency.
Right. A targeted expert can zero in on the complex bit much faster than your team trying to get up to speed from scratch.
That tracks. But what about independence? Does bringing someone external muddy the waters there?
Interestingly, sometimes it actually helps with independence.
Really? How?
Okay, imagine an internal auditor was heavily involved in, say, rolling out a new system. Now they have to audit it. That can look tricky.
A bit too close for comfort.
Exactly. So bringing in an independent external expert to look at specific high-risk parts of that system adds a layer of objectivity. It bolsters the credibility, like getting a second opinion from a doctor, you know.
Got it. So the auditors don't just like throw the problem over the wall and walk away.
Oh, absolutely not. Guideline 2206.2 is very clear. You don't need to become the expert yourself,
Okay.
but you absolutely need enough understanding to guide their work, understand what they find, and judge if it actually helps meet your audit goals.
So you need to speak their language at least a little bit.
You do. Think about using a SOC report, like a SOC2.
Right.
As the auditor, you might not know every single control detail at that service provider, but you must understand what the report covers, its scope, its limitations, and how those findings affect your audit.
Okay. What if you decide you really, really need an expert, maybe for some obscure legacy system or something, but you just can't find one or can't get approval? What then?
That's a critical scenario, and Guideline 2206.2 covers it. If you can't get the necessary expertise, you have to meticulously document the impact.
Document how it affects the audit objectives.
Yes, precisely. How does this gap affect your ability to give assurance? You need to detail that in the audit plan. Figure out any alternative tests you can do to maybe lessen the risk.
And if the risk is just too high?
Then some pretty serious cases, you might actually have to consider if you can even complete the engagement responsibly. Declining might be the only option if the risk is unmanageable without that expertise.
Wow. Okay. So let's say you do find someone. You've decided you need them. You've identified a potential expert. Now you need to check them out, right? Standard 1206.2 and Guideline 2206.3, assessing their adequacy. What does that involve?
It involves proper due diligence.
Yeah.
You can't just pick a name out of a hat. You need confidence in them.
So what are you looking for? Qualification.
Yep, professional qualifications, certifications, that sort of thing. But also their actual competence. Do they have proven skills and, crucially, relevant experience in the specific area you need?
Relevant experience is key, I guess, not just general expertise.
Exactly. And do they have the resources, the time, the tools, the team, if needed? And then, the big one again, independence.
Back to independence.
Always. Are there any conflicts of interest? Could anything bias their work? You need to dig into that. And finally, it's smart to look at their own quality control processes. How do they ensure their work is reliable?
That's quite a checklist. What if it's someone you use regularly, like a go-to consultant? Do you vet them every single time?
Good question. Guideline 2206.3 says for ongoing relationships, you should still periodically review their competence.
Makes sense. Things change.
Right. Make sure they're still up to date, still meet professional standards, still independent. It's like a regular health check for that professional relationship.
Okay, expert selected and vetted. Now the main event, actually using their work. Standard 1206.3 plus Guidelines 20206.4 and 2206.5 talk about assessing, reviewing, evaluating their work. It's not passive, is it?
Not at all. You, the auditor, have to actively engage, critically review what they give you.
So what does that look like? Checking their report.
Yes, but deeply. Guideline 2206.4 points out key things. First, does the scope of what they did actually match your audit objectives? Do they answer the question you needed answered?
Okay. Scope alignment.
Second, did they make any significant assumptions? You need to identify those and understand them. Are they reasonable?
Assumptions can hide a lot.
They can. And third, are their findings and conclusions actually backed up by the evidence they gathered? You need to see that logical link. You can't just, accept the conclusion on faith.
You mentioned earlier things get complicated with outsourcing, supplier relationships. How does using experts play into that, especially if, say, a cloud provider has their own audit reports?
Yeah, Guideline 2206.5 touches on this. In those complex multi-party environments, you might get reports from other auditors or experts who looked at, say, the service provider's controls.
Like the SOC report example again?
Exactly. But as the primary auditor for your organization, you need to be careful. If you don't have access to the actual evidence, the working papers behind that third-party report,
You can't fully rely on it.
it becomes difficult to form your own comprehensive opinion. You can't just inherit their assurance level without understanding how they got there. You need to assess the quality and relevance of their work, too.
So the auditor ultimately decides how much weight to give the expert's work and how to use it in their own report.
Absolutely. Standard 1206.5 puts that responsibility squarely on the auditor. How much reliance are you placing on this? Will you refer to their report directly? Will it just inform your own testing? And Guideline 22206.5 adds you need to see how their findings impact your overall audit goals.
And make sure any gaps are filled.
Yes. Figure out if you need to do more work yourself because of what they found or didn't find. And importantly, connect it back to management. Remember General Standard 1007 on assertions?
Yes. Management needs to own the assertions.
Right. Even assertions supported by an expert's work ultimately need to be verified and formally approved by management. The expert provides evidence, but management makes the assertion.
Okay, but what if you review the expert's work and it's just not enough? It doesn't give you the evidence you need. Standard 1206.6 and Guideline 2206.6 mention additional test procedures.
That's the next step. If the expert's work, for whatever reason, doesn't provide sufficient appropriate evidence for your audit objectives, you, the auditor, must perform additional procedures.
Meaning?
Well, it could mean doing your own testing in that area to supplement or verify what the expert did. Or it might mean doing more testing on the expert's work itself, digging deeper into their methods or data to get comfortable.
Okay, so you try to bridge the gap yourself.
You have to, because ultimately...
But a final opinion rests with the auditor. Standard 1206.7 and Guideline 2206.7.
Exactly. The expert is a source of evidence, often critical evidence, but the auditor synthesizes everything, their own work, the expert's work to form the final audit opinion or conclusion.
And if even after doing extra tests, you still don't have enough evidence,
Then your audit opinion has to reflect that. You'd likely need to issue a qualified opinion or even a disclaimer, citing a scope limitation. You can't give clean assurance if the evidence isn't there.
Makes sense. You also need to be clear about using the expert's work in your report. Right?
Yes, Guideline 2206.7 mentions that if you use the expert's report, your audit report should include your view on its suitability and relevance. And another key point here, consider what management has done about the expert's findings.
Have they actually acted on their recommendations?
Right. What's the status of remediation? What are the timelines? That context is important for the overall picture of control effectiveness.
Okay, one last piece. Documentation. Guideline 206.8, what's crucial to write down?
Well, transparency and traceability are key. You need to document the why and how.
Like, if you couldn't get an expert you needed?
Definitely document that, the impact on your objectives and how you tried to manage the risk. Also, clearly state how much you used and relied on the expert's work.
Especially if access was limited for some reason?
Yes, like legal restrictions, preventing full access to their working papers. Document those constraints. And fundamentally, the audit report itself must clearly state that you used the work of another expert.
So wrapping this up, this whole framework around Standard 1206 and the guidelines, it's really about a structured, careful way to bring in specialist help.
It is. It's about being smart, knowing when you need help, finding the right help, checking their work critically, and then integrating it responsibly into your own audit judgment.
It acknowledges that IT is complex and auditors can't know everything, but provides a way to still get robust assurance.
Precisely. It enhances the audit's quality and reliability by leveraging specialized skills strategically,
Mm.
and that builds confidence for the organization, for stakeholders, everyone involved.
That's a great summary. So, for you listening, maybe take a second and think about a time you needed an expert for something outside your wheelhouse, fixing a car maybe, or understanding a legal document, or even a complex medical issue.
Mhm.
How did you decide you needed help? How did you sort of assess the expert? How much did you rely on their judgment versus your own understanding? There are probably some interesting parallels to the IT audit process we just walked through.
It's a good thought exercise.
Hmm.
That principle of leveraging expertise applies in so many areas.
Absolutely. And if this has piqued your interest in the standards governing IT audits, definitely check out the full ISACA ITAF framework. There's a lot more detail there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.